Hello, all you citizens of the world, wherever you're from, wherever you're at, wherever you're going. Welcome to the Live from the Heartland show. This show has been broadcast and on air, on a line, and Zoomed, etc., for now over 20 years. It started out at the Heartland Cafe, the late great Heartland Cafe in Chicago's Rogers Park. We moved it to the studio downtown for WLUW. We've also done it at the old No Exit Cafe and the Red Line Tap. And since the beginning of the pandemic, which is just over 3 years ago, we've been doing Heartland at Home. This is number 157, Heartland at Home, during the time of the pandemic. This week begins our fourth year. So I hope you'll stick around. We have a couple interesting guests, and I have things to share. I just came back from El Paso, Texas, and El Paso is in the news a lot for a number of reasons. In this case, it's a crossing point. It has historically been a crossing point, the pass from Mexico and the territory of Mexico into the United States. It's one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. Juarez is much larger than El Paso. And I've been going down there for 20 years to be involved in a group called Basketball in the Barrio. I've been involved with Athletes United for Peace, and I always show this at the end of the show. I'll do it now. Do Sports Not War, Athletes United for Peace. And way back about 2001 or two, Athletes United for Peace got in touch or was contacted by Basketball in the Barrio, a wonderful program started by Russ Bradford and Steve Yellen. It takes place at a place called the Armejo Center, about 400 yards from the border. Each year we have, 100, this time I think 150 kids living in the Segundo Barrio, ages 6 to 11, with a whole lot of counselors that have come through the camp and are now doing other things, but come back each year, as well as a number of athletes from around the country. And usually there's a cast of the current UTEP, University of Texas El Paso historic basketball program. So this year, Sean Harrington was there again, and, he's been on the show. He was a player at New Mexico State. He is the subject of Russ Bradford's great book, All the Dreams We've Dreamed, about basketball and murder on the West Side. Sean was paralyzed while defending his daughter in a mistaken identity case. He's been a number of years now, but he comes every year to camp and really inspires kids. Also from Chicago, basketball player Maurice Copeland, Danny Postal, who's been on the show in the past and has a new magazine called New Lines. It's like a local magazine for the world. Danny will be coming on the show soon. I ran into Jeannie McCleary and Ken Kepler of Bayou Seco, and they're going to be coming on the show again soon. They live up in a place called Silver City, New Mexico. And I first went to Silver City in 1965 or 6, probably 66, along with Joe Blum and Terry Cannon from a newspaper we used to put out called The Movement. And we visited with striking miners there. And those of you who follow film might know of a film called Salt of the Earth, which is one of the best labor flicks ever made. It was pretty much banned around the United States because of its leftist nature, when the women have to actually take on the hard work of the strike because there's an injunction against the men. But it was good talking to those folks. I got filled in on New Mexico. New Mexico, right next to Texas, is a very interesting place. I think I mentioned last week that New Mexico has given a $5,000 raise to all their teachers, while Texas has cut $5,000 from its teachers' force. The way of the world these days, kind of a living and reveling in contradictions. While in El Paso, one of the last things that I want to share with you that I did was I went to a party with all of the coaches after the camp, and we were at a house, and there was a beautiful photo on the wall I had never seen before. It was of Malcolm X taking a photograph of Muhammad Ali right after Ali beat Liston. He was then, I think, Cassius Clay in Miami. and it's a gorgeous photo. And for those of you who get to watch the show, I'll hopefully Hal will put up a photo of that. Okay. It wasn't without incident, though. I'm going to share that as an old guy, I try to watch my step. And I was there along with my granddaughter, Ida Rocket, and we were going off to eat not long after we had arrived, walking from the hotel to a place called Gonzalo's. And I don't remember tripping. I don't remember stumbling. I went flat face to the pavement, healed up on my nose and my chin. I think my arms kind of blocked the fall. There's a lot of cuts and scrapes and one very sore and still swollen elbow. But I went to the urgent care on the urging of my son and my wife and one of my sons, and no break. So I'm here and I'm coming back. Okay, while I was in El Paso, one of the things I did at night a little bit was to watch some sports, and I'm not going to go into that. But I did watch a PBS documentary about the Buffalo Soldiers fighting on two fronts. And it's a beautiful history, a beautiful documentary. You can get it if you go to just Google PBS Buffalo Soldier documentary. And, it's kind of a history of the role of Black people in the military since just before the Civil War. Late in the 1800s, there was a graduate of West Point that became the first Black general, but the U.S. didn't know what to do with him. And it took another 50 years until there was another African-American graduate of West Point. They would send him to Haiti. They would send him to places in Africa, and the movie goes into the role of the Buffalo Soldier who are not only fighting discrimination on one front, but they're fighting Native Americans on the other front. Kind of a sad story. It's a lot of history that people should know. And one thing that a fellow in the movie says is it's not Black history, it's American history. So we want to stop talking about Black History Month or Latin American History Month. I understand the need to get people's attention on the history that's been forgotten, but it's really time we address everything as American history, for better or worse, the good and the bad, all of it, and we share that with people. You want to check out a little bit more on basketball in the barrio, there is a Facebook page. I'm not sure what you'll find on YouTube. There have been movies made about it. I've been going down there for 20 some plus years, and I'm going to keep going as often as I can. Moving a little bit forward, I'm just going to share, it's important that people take note of the religious battles and the politics that continue to plague the people of the United States. In the New York Times today, and we are recording on Wednesday, June 14th for the week of June 17th, they report in the New York Times that the Southern Baptists have voted to keep out churches with female pastors. They're doing this in order to reverse the liberal drift. So it's adios to Saddleback Church in Southern California with 50,000 some members. A Pentecostal church that kind of has not been as terrible as some others. Anyhow, the battle goes on between good and bad. The way people look at things is very different in many ways, but I think there is some good and there is some bad. Clearly trying to take away the rights of LGBT people, African Americans, Native Americans, other people, book banning, all these things, I say they're bad. And I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to take a short musical break, and we will be back with our first guest here on Live from the Heartland for the week of June 17th, number 157 since the beginning of the pandemic. Stay tuned. Once again, this is number 157 since the beginning of the pandemic. It is the first show of our fourth year since we started doing it by Zoom. And all of you people who watch the show or listen to the show know that we love music, we love art, we love sport, and we believe that all of these things, music, art, sport, many more things, can help move people in a positive direction toward all of us working to make the world a better place. So today, it gives me a lot of pleasure to bring on someone that's going to tell us a little bit about an organization called Genesis at the Crossroads. We're going to learn a little bit about the organization, what they're doing, and an upcoming concert. Gives me great pleasure to bring on Wendy Sternberg, who is the founder, the executive and artistic director of Genesis at the Crossroads. Hello to you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's wonderful to be here, and it's nice to be the first person leading the 4th year of really important programming.
Right on. And we want to thank Lynn Orman, our music producer, and I'm just going to call her producer because she brings us great guests, and she's pretty excited about having you come on. Let's start off. I understand you are Chicago-based. I think you're over on Burling. In the old days, I could tell you stories about around that address that I have for you, but that's another story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Genesis at the Crossroads, what it is, what it does?
Yeah, thank you. Genesis at the Crossroads is a 23-year-old organization working at an intersection of social justice, education, and art to build peaceful communities which foster healing. And we've been doing this since 1999, as I mentioned, 23 years. Started at a time when it feels like the world was so different, but we keep having these disruptions that make us feel like the whole world is anew. And I think we either have an opportunity to find ways to bring us together, or we're all going to go down. And so Genesis at the Crossroads is all about creating programs and spaces and models and all different ways of bringing people together to find our common humanity and to not just bring our differences into the same room, but to celebrate them and know that there's wisdom in that diversity. And when we bring that to bear on all different issues, we can find tremendous ways to navigate the greatest challenges of our time. The areas that we work in, which are not siloed or vertical, they're all integrated, are arts and peace building, mostly music and peace building, leadership and peace building education, and doing work in social impact business development or humanitarian impact, but not in areas of water and medicine and housing and food.
Well, how did you get the name? And then what led you to start this organization? What were you doing at that time?
So I am a physician by training. I'm still a physician. I practiced for over 20 years at the front line of medicine. And I think that healing is a through line, well, for everything in my life, but certainly for Genesis at the Crossroads. And where the name comes from is an interesting story. So I had the profound privilege of spending 6 months on the Malabar coast in India and doing medical work in the south of India, in a place that I had written about when I was a young teenager, actually for my bat mitzvah of all things. And this was a community that I had explored, how they ended up in India. And it was this incredible cross-cultural crossroads, if you will. And on the Malabar coast, when I was visiting, I was meeting some of the fishermen with the Chinese fishing nets that were bringing in fish. It was a place where the Dutch had been. It was the place where the Maharaja had given the Jewish community the charter to have a synagogue back in the 3rd century. And it was where the spice trade was for the Arabian Peninsula coming to India. And I had I have a dance background. I have a lot of arts in my family, and I have done a lot of arts. And I was watching the fishermen bring in the nets and thinking, wow, this is just like a dance. And I went up to them, couldn't speak Malayalam, and motioned, I would like you to teach me how to bring in the nets. And I came back from, this experience of literally this dance movement, this multicultural world, this blending of all cultures where trade occurred and people bumped up against cultures and all different aspects of humanity. And it was not necessarily the richest in money, but in terms of human riches was so incredible. And I came back from this and started working on creating an organization that was bringing people together through all the things I mentioned, And I thought, well, there's something about this meeting at this intersection. But intersection feels like a traffic light. It feels like where you stop or start. And I wanted something more than that intersection. I wanted, we talk about Morocco being a crossroads and a cultural crossroads. And there is a little something biblical about a crossroads, but Genesis is a-religious and apolitical. So it wasn't about that kind of crossroads. And then there's something that happens when people meet and there's an exchange, and it's this moment in time when something arises. So something that comes from nothing is a nod to this idea of generative or Genesis. So something begins anew, and it's often in a declarative statement. So that's where the name comes from.
Oh, that's a good story. I like that. And I love the crossovers. I love the crossing, where people meet, borders, migration. That's one reason I love Chicago, despite all of the, people saying it's the most racist and segregated city. We clearly have a lot to do, but it's also a place where all kind of people cross over, mix together in all kind of ways, and build some new things. I'm also reminded of in my own past of writing a piece called "Time to Heal," and in that I encourage a politics of affirmation, of people affirming the good in all different things and bringing those things together. Enough of that. You got a number of programs coming up. And one of the reasons Lynn wanted you to come on, because you have an event called Sounds of Healing. And I know you're taking it to DC, but you're also going to be right here in Chicago on June 22nd at Francis Parker School in the Diane and David B. Heller Auditorium, 4:30 to 6:30. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that event and what it's going to do, and who's going to be in it, and what people might expect to see, and how they get the tickets?
Sure. Yes, I'm delighted to share this program with everyone who's listening, and with you, Michael, as well. So Sounds of Healing was created during the pandemic, and it was meant to be an in-person program. Then we pivoted, like many other organizations, to do a virtual program. So we worked with 37 people, 33 of whom were artists from all over the world in 17 countries, navigating every imaginable barrier you can think of. So geographic and race and ethnicity and culture and language and time zones and the whole 9 yards. And what was interesting, it's hard to remember the early stages of the pandemic, except for the things that were shocking. But what we forget is that there were phases of it where America was in lockdown, but other parts of the world were not. So actually, for Sounds of Healing, our production team was in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And they were able to go into studios and record music and not wear a mask because they hadn't been hit hard with the pandemic. And as the pandemic traveled around the world, some of our artists were more isolated than others and couldn't even go to a recording studio. So one of our artists actually found the best place for sound was in her closet. And she pulled out all the clothes, went in her closet, and with her iPhone recorded the parts of her piece. And I'm actually delighted to say that she was one of the young people in the program that scored a song called Es Tiempo de Sanar, which means it's time to heal in Spanish. And she scored the piece and is one of the vocalists performing in it. So this is a collaboration of our Genesis World Music Ensemble called Saffron Caravan. They're a group of professional artists. The group was founded in 2007, and the larger group is 9 ensemble members, and they are from Iran, Afghanistan, Cuba, Morocco, India, the Middle East, Brazil, Venezuela, and Europe. And this particular group that we're touring is 4 musicians from Saffron Caravan, plus a bassist who's from Chicago. And I can share their names in a moment. And then we are we collaborated with our professional world music ensemble with young graduates of a leadership peace building education that Genesis runs over the summer called the Genesis Academy Summer Institute. And the youth that participate in the program are not necessarily musicians by trade. These are high school students, 15 to 19, and inevitably they are creative because the program has an artistic thread through it, and some of them are gifted in music and creative writing. So we had 7 students participate from Afghanistan, the Congo, Chicago, Pakistan, Pakistan, Venezuela, and Bogota, Colombia. And we are delighted to be presenting work in Sounds of Healing it's not new right now, but it was new for this program when we created Sounds of Healing. And we did the world premiere on Zoom, sharing it with, I think we reached 33 countries or 34 countries, including Iran, if you can imagine that. So it's spread around the world. We have a map on our Instagram page that shows the pinpoints of where people heard the program. And that was on December 19th, 2020, and we re-aired it in May of 2021. And then we moved into the live in-person programs. And our idea was to put healing into the universe. So we worked with the Adler Planetarium as the very first venue for the world premiere. And it was a really magical program. And now we're in the midst of the world tour, as you mentioned.
You got this tour. You're going to be in Chicago. You're also in DC. Where else are you going to take it?
So we're in DC performing for the U.S. Congress on Capitol Hill on June 21st, which is the day before we come to Chicago again. And then we will be going off the coast of Madagascar to a small island nation state called Mauritius in December of this year. And we're working on a very interesting program on music and healing, looking at climate change and thinking about that for small island states that if we don't work quickly enough to heal our planet, we'll be underwater. And then from there, the following year, we're going to Europe, and we'll be in Berlin, Germany, and Normandy, France. And Normandy, France is a big program that's an artist in residency program and will be for the 80th anniversary celebrations of D-Day. So I'm very proud of that.
You've got how many people going on this tour? 7?
We have 10 people plus myself.
And how many kids from Chicago or people from Chicago? There's a bass player, anyone else?
Well, we have a bass player. We have Catherine Davis, who's a guest artist. I want to introduce, you had asked me who's in the program, so I want to go through that.
Do it.
And we have a few people from Chicago, and we have a few people who lived in Chicago and now live in other places. So in Saffron Caravan is Baji Assad, who's Lebanese Brazilian, and she's in Sao Paulo and part of the time also in Chicago. We have Aaron Ben Susan, who's Moroccan, from Essaouira, and he is from a dynastic family of people who learn the liturgical music, rabbis from Casablanca and all over Morocco. So we bring in the Crossroads, that is the original Crossroads of thousands of years, Morocco. We have Javier Saume Matse, who's our percussionist from Venezuela, and he used to live in Chicago. He's now in Albuquerque. Then we have Haitam Safia, who is Middle Eastern European, and he splits his time between the Galilee and the Netherlands. And unfortunately, he will not physically be with us, but he did a beautiful oud collaboration with Stacy Keach, the actor Stacy Keach, reading Alberto Rios's poem called A House Called Tomorrow. And Haitam did an oud improvisation to this poem. And we had that in the virtual program. And because Haitam cannot be with us, neither can Stacy Keach, we're actually showing the Zoom call with that music. So we still have our oud virtuoso with us. And then we have Jack Zara, who's from Chicago. He's our bassist. And we have 2 guest artists who are joining us, Catherine Davis, who's a blues and jazz vocalist from Chicago, just was honored by our mayor at the Blues Fest a few days ago. And we have Tony Milano, who is a keyboardist, who is also from Chicago, but went to the West Coast, but is coming back to Chicago quite a lot. And then we have the students from our Genesis Academy Summer Institute. And there's a couple less of them. Sophia Simpkins from Chicago is not going to be with us. And Azar from Afghanistan and Patrick from the Congo, who also lived in Chicago, will not be with us. But the ones who will be are Farhan from Pakistan, from Islamabad, and Rohina Madni, who is from Karachi. And Rohina was in the very first Genesis Academy Summer Institute in 2015, and Farhan was in the second one. And then we have two students from Venezuela who are no longer students, they're all adults now. And that is Diego Madriz, who's from Venezuela, finishing up his undergraduate degree, who's a human rights activist in Venezuela. And we have Andrea Valentina Perez, who left Venezuela to live in Spain, a lot safer. And she is the person who, as I mentioned before, had scored Es Tiempo de Sonar with some of our professional musicians, and also is performing in it.
Wendy, I saw a photo while doing a little research before you came on of a number of kids laying down on the ground in a peace symbol. And I'm wondering, where is that picture from and what was it about? Is it from your Summer Institute? Or
yes.
And where does the Summer Institute take place? And is that going on now, even though it's not too warm outside?
So the Summer Institute is a program that occurs in July and August. It got put on hold because of the pandemic, but we started it in 2014 and had the first cohort in 2015. And we have applicants, actually by the fourth year of the program, we were having applicants from 30-something countries, now have 37 countries submitting applications. It's an invitation-only program. And so it has to be through some network of people who are familiar with Genesis at the Crossroads. And it is a summer program that was a proof of concept for a larger program we were doing that was a boarding school for global leadership with a campus peace hub surrounding it. And COVID made the boarding school not a possibility.
Right.
And so the Peace Hub still exists as an entity. And the Summer Institute, we cherry pick next generation youth talent from all over the world, ages 15 to 19. We bring them to Chicago, and they are in 4 curricular areas that they work in during the time that they're here. And that is arts and peace building, heroes and human rights, environmental sustainability, and peace journalism. So you asked about that photo, and that photo was taken in 2017. We work with WBEZ, our NPR station here in Chicago, and they are part of the Peace Journalism program. And we did a whole unit on the power of civic dialogue and public radio. And we were outside of the WBEZ studio. It was this glorious day, not a cloud in the sky, beautiful, beautiful blue sky. And there was some other group that was doing some dance routine on the lower level down from WBEZ. And I went up to the higher level and asked them to create a peace symbol with their bodies. And I took that picture. And I love that picture.
We'll run out of time soon, so I'm going to throw this at you. If you're talking to younger people or anybody, what are your what recommendations or suggestions or methods for bringing about more healing and peace in the world? What can people do? It should become a major theme, obviously, in people's lives. Certainly necessary. Your thoughts, your recommendations, your advice to the masses of listeners and viewers out there who want to get involved.
I think the most important thing I would say to a young person is go get displaced. Go places that rearrange your molecules, that take the things that are your quote unquote truths in your life and upend some of them, make you question them, sometimes in service of making your sensibilities stronger about those things, but to open up your worldview, to listen to other people's perspectives that are as radically different from your own as you can find, and to understand that if you surround yourself with people that are always of the same opinion of that you hold, we can never fix anything when we do that. We have to find ways to come together that honor our collective humanity and that help us understand it's not that we need to put a check in a box on diversity and inclusion and all these other things. This is not tokenism. We don't have time for tokenism. We need to have authentic conversations where we're sharing ourselves and our communities. And when we do that, and when we're known, conflict not only lessens, it can disappear. And young people have agency to do this if they so choose to put themselves in the mix and need to have their voices expressed. And if you have intelligence and a good heart, it is a shame if you don't put it into the world.
No, I like all that. And it reminds me of, I just came out with a book called Crossing Borders, which regular listeners or viewers have heard me ramble on about. But for me, when I first crossed the border into Mexico in 1962 on a motorcycle, my worldview changed. I mean, it just was very different. And as an organizer for many years, trying to recruit people to leave school and go out and do good in the world, I would say to them, it's important to put yourself in a certain place, in a certain position that forces you to go through changes. And it sounds like you're doing that. How about one more time giving us a little pitch for the Thursday event, because there are tickets available and it's right here, not too far from where we're sitting, both of us are right now, and a lot of people should go hear it, see it.
Sounds of Healing is a multicultural experience that will inspire our audience members to think about healing in our present day context. What does it mean to us as individuals? What does it mean to us sitting together in an auditorium with people from different communities coming together? What does it mean for our violent city of Chicago that's having a lot of issues and a lot of divisions, which are frankly iconic for our country and our world, where we are having more division than coming together. So it's inviting our audience to be a part of this conversation for healing and for building peace in the world.
Wendy Sternberg of Genesis at the Crossroads, it's really an honor and a pleasure to meet you. And I'm really looking forward to following your organization, meeting you, talking it up a little bit, because I think there's stuff we could do together.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
We'll look forward to really to meeting you, and good luck with this. And I hope to make it to the concert on June 22nd at Francis Parker School here in Chicago. Everybody listening in or watching, stay tuned. We'll be right back here on the left end of your dial or on the TV screen, wherever you are. Stay tuned to Live from the Heartland. Welcome back to more Live from the Heartland for the week of June 17th. And once again, this is number 157 since the beginning of the pandemic. It is the first of year 4 since all of this started. We're doing it by Zoom. And those of you who've been watching the show regularly know that I usually bring on one of two guys, either Gordon Thompson, a longtime track coach, or the actor, the martial artist, the instructor, music, producer of film these days, Adam James, who happens to be, disclosure here, my cousin. But he is one of the most knowledgeable dudes I know about what's going on in sports from a good perspective. Hello, Adam, out there in California.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you back. And I see you still have your hair in an altered state, a different color. Tell the folks why you have that kind of reddish hair. What's going on in your film work?
Well, I'm currently working on a new streaming series called Doc Savage, Man of Copper. And it's inspired by the original 1930s Pulp Fiction character, Doc Savage. Many of the listeners and watchers here may be familiar with Doc Savage. It was the most popular, character of those Pulp Fiction novels, along with The Shadow. Many people say that Doc Savage is the original or the world's first superhero. They did a movie in the 1970s starring Ron Ellie, who played Tarzan in the Tarzan television show. But Doc Savage is this amazing character. He's a scientist. He's an adventurer. He's a martial artist. He's a detective. And so we're doing a brand new streaming series. We're filming in Fresno, California. We just wrapped on the pilot season, first 3 episodes. And the hair, getting back to the hair, is a tip of the cap to the original character, Doc Savage. If you were a fan of that original Pulp Fiction character, the Pulp Fiction books would come with a really great artwork on the cover, and Doc Savage would have this red hair, and he would be wearing a khaki shirt. I'm not wearing my khaki shirt now, but I'm wearing my Muhammad Ali shirt right now.
Right on.
For the show,
Nice.
I'm wearing that khaki shirt. And by the way, the hair was styled by a gentleman named Billy Yamaguchi, who is a phenomenal hairstylist here in Los Angeles area, but he's all over the country. He's known for feng shui hairstyling.
Nice. Well, you're looking good, cuz.
Thank you
And,
so much. I appreciate it.
I've been watching a lot of sports myself. We've got basketball, we've got hockey. There's all kind of stuff going on in golf, tennis. Ohtani hitting home runs and pitching. There's been some boxing. Oklahoma women's softball, NC2A track and field, and even a little boxing. I see you got your Muhammad Ali shirt on, and at the beginning of the show, I talked about a photograph of Malcolm X taking a photograph of Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, after the first listing fight in Miami. And it's a beautiful photo that I think Hal is going to put up for the people who view it on youtube.com/Heartland Media videos. So let's talk sports. What's
Brilliant.
most important? What do you want to talk about first? You take it away.
Well, gosh, you just listed down multiple amazing accomplishments in the sporting world. Athletics, of course, is a great opportunity for people to come together, compete, but also, cooperate and achieve great things together. So first of all, where do we start? Gosh, we just had the first ever championship in basketball for the city of Denver, the state of Colorado. For all those Nugget fans, congratulations. Amazing run by that team. What a fun team they are. They overcame a lot of very, very strong teams, Miami Heat, obviously, but also the local team here, the Los Angeles Lakers. Denver proved themselves, and they deserve that title. But also, of course, the very next night, you've got Las Vegas winning its first ever professional sports title in anything. Obviously, boxing and MMA have been professional sports based out of the city of Las Vegas for many years. But until the Las Vegas Golden Knights started, I believe it was 7 years ago, there had never been a professional sports team based in Las Vegas because many of the sporting organizations had a dim view of the gambling connection to the city and how that might affect the players. But now we know that with proper, regulations and enforcement, that can be handled. And so Las Vegas has this really cool new stadium, T-Mobile Arena. They've got this great new team, the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Then they added the Las Vegas Aces, the women's basketball team, and then also the football team, the Los Angeles Raiders. I have to correct myself there for a moment. I said that it was the first ever sports championship. It's not. It's the first ever for a hockey team, but the women's basketball team, the Aces, also won a championship, and they deserve all that respect. They were the first ones to win something for the city of Las Vegas. So, and then obviously we had this phenomenal women's softball team, Oklahoma. They deserve a tremendous amount of recognition. They achieved something that only the UCLA Bruins women's softball team achieved, and that is 3 straight championships. Wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma goes on to beat that record and achieve even more amazing accomplishments.
Adam, you made me think there was a woman, and I'm sorry I don't know her name, but was on that team who announced that she's going to go back to Nebraska. And it reminded me that there is a lot of, it used to be, you could redshirt, you could take a year out, and maybe you get a year playing as a graduate student somewhere. Now, people are just like, teams are buying each other, their players. I'm not sure if it's through scholarships, actual cash, what's going on. What's your take on the moving around of all these athletes from team to team and the realignment in college sport?
Well, I know a lot of fans are upset. I know a lot of people who follow sports teams and players sometimes feel that these player movements symbolize disloyalty. But truthfully, it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. We as adult Americans should have a right to move according to where we feel it's best for ourselves, for our future, for our families, for our lives. And these collegiate sporting organizations that have locked in athletes through contractual obligations to not be able to do that isn't right. So I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's a wonderful, and it is going to lead towards, some challenges, but ultimately it's competition, and that's what is going to drive a higher level of performance. Teams that want to get those best players are going to, roll out the welcome mat. They're going to do everything they can to say, come on over here. Now, of course, with the new NIL programs where people can get paid through commercials and other sponsorships, there are certain, hubs that will attract more athletes because there's going to be more commercial opportunities for it, major cities. But that doesn't mean that somebody can't go to a smaller market, do extremely well, both financially with the NIL, but also academically and athletically, and then go on to achieve great things in their lives. So I think ultimately it's all going to play itself out. It's going to be a good thing for our country, for our sports world. And I'm all for it.
Yeah, do you think this is like Kurt Flood back in the day, free agency, but this is for college athletes?
Yes.
And,
I remember.
Go ahead.
I was just going to mention there was a sports journalist who wrote an article about how shocked he was that these athletes were moving around like this. And he said, boy, I wish I could do that. And I wrote him a personal letter, and I said, you can. It's called resigning from your job and taking another one in another newspaper or other publication. You have a right to do that, sir. So why are you denying that right to an 18 to 21-year-old who just happens to be really good at playing a particular sport, and they'd like to go to a different school?
Did you get a response from him?
Yes, he actually wrote me back, and he said, thank you. It was a very well-written message to him, and he duly noted.
One other thing on college athletes, I think in football, I think the Alabama coach came out and said that they should be able to have a union. And as you know, our friend Dave Megacy has been pushing this for a long time. He played pro football, wrote a book out of their league, worked for the NFL Players Association. And throughout all the time I've known him, he's talking about the right of student athletes to unionize. What's the status of that?
Well, gosh, Northwestern, my alma mater, came really close to pushing a union vote through, but it was not voted through by the athletes. But they discussed it, and they analyzed it, and they thought about it, and they talked about it. And I think that's a big progressive step right there. And part of the challenge was private universities versus public universities and how the athletes are seen. But one thing's for sure is after the pandemic, it became even more clear. If people didn't already know, these are employees. These are people that are working. They go to work. Their job is a little different. Their job is running around or swimming or jumping. And then they're expected to, on top of that, go to school and get great grades. So we need to recognize that they are employees of these universities. They're driving revenue for these universities, and they should have a right to be protected and make collective decisions that's best for them.
And you would predict that, we got a number of athletes who go to schools in not very progressive states, and I'm sure some of them are not coming out of union homes. What do you think will happen? I mean, Northwestern may have been, I could see that vote going the other way. What do you think will happen down the line? How much will the union actually come to be in football in colleges?
Well, I think the bigger question there is the perception of unions in our country. There have always been some people who have had a negative or dim view, and they've tried to push that towards others. Right now, there is a big political movement that's pushing unions down, saying the unions aren't good. Some people even call various unions evil and demonic and such. Unions are a wonderful thing. All it is people.
Right on, brother.
Absolutely. People coming together and saying, let's discuss this and let's make a decision together in a united fashion that's best for all of us. Boy, it sounds an awful lot like the United States of America. So I'm all for unions. I think that they're a good thing, but I do recognize that there are others in our greater society, in our community, that don't see it that way. And so as a result, going back to your original question, do I see unions popping up all over sports, college sports anytime soon? No. It's going to take a while. And I think ultimately, as people have their rights taken, is when they fight back and they unite in an effort to maintain and reacquire those rights. So that's what's probably going to happen.
Well, Adam, James, let's talk a little boxing here.
Yes, sir.
And it's a gruesome sport. The more I watch it these days, it's hard to take. I grew up loving it, though, because my dad and your uncle, Hal James, the late great, the other Hal James, he produced the Phillies Saturday Night Fights on ABC back in the 50s for Philly Cigars.
Yes.
And I got to actually see Muhammad Ali later on win the Golden Gloves in 1960 at Madison Square Garden. And I also got to see Kid Gavilan fight up in Boston. I don't watch a lot of boxing anymore. I don't follow it, but in a hotel room in El Paso, I think it was probably after the NBA game, I ended up watching the Lopez versus Taylor fight. Lopez, I think he's out of Honduras. Teofimo Lopez, he's from Brooklyn.
Yes.
Right? And he fought Taylor, who had never lost a fight, who had was out of Scotland. It was a great fight, and this guy Lopez was something else. Tell us what you know about that fight and the aftermath.
Well, first of all, I love boxing. Boxing is probably my favorite sport, and I know that it can be brutal and gruesome, and of course, there's terrible challenges with the sport, as there is in life. But it's also a really dramatic sport. It has such a rich history, and there's so many movies that have this amazing sport as the center of it. And this particular fighter, Teofimo Lopez, is a fantastic fighter. Unfortunately, there were some, and this is the nature of the combat sports. So sometimes there's some motions and some words that are said that are probably inappropriate. And he said some things to Taylor leading up to the fight that were really out of line. And Taylor then didn't back down. He said some things also that were probably things that he wishes he hadn't said. But words are said.
They were hugging each other at the end, though, even after the decision.
Absolutely. And that's the nature of boxing. You hate each other going in the ring, and when it's over, you hug each other and you hope you're not too badly hurt. But you mentioned something in the lead up to the show when we were just chatting offline, and that was that Lopez said he was retiring. And I said, no. The inside word is that he is currently going through a really difficult divorce.
Right.
He's in a custody battle for his child. So there's some people who are insiders who think that this might be a little bit of a legal move to make sure that as he moves out of this relationship, there's no ties to any future earnings that he could be getting because, hey, I'm retired. And then after the legal proceedings are done, hey, I'm unretired and you have nothing to do with this new phase of my life. So that could very well be happening. But at the same time, hey, God bless the man. He just did something that very few people can ever do, and that is he won this championship. It's the lineal championship of the junior welterweight division. He deserves tremendous recognition. He made a good amount of money, not as much as he'd like. It has to do with some of these smaller weight classes and how tough it is to generate interest for some of those fighters. But he made over $2 million, so maybe he is going to retire, invest that money wisely, and never step into a ring again. I'd be surprised. There was another topic I wanted to bring up today, and that is professional golf. And for those of the listeners and viewers that watch this wonderful sport, you're probably a little disheartened, as I am, by what has occurred with the Professional Golf Association, PGA, and how it has now went from extremely upset and protesting this new golf league, LIV, L-I-V, which was backed by the Saudi Arabians. Many people were saying that it was a sports washing, endeavor by the Saudis to try to take attention away from some of their human rights atrocities throughout modern history, and try to get people to just say, hey, they got a lot of money. Why don't we do business with them? So the PGA, of course, said absolutely no way. They even encouraged the 9/11 survivors and family members from that horrible tragedy to join the protest. And then they just went into business with this group. And many golfers are really, really upset. I will say that, these other sporting organizations like Major League Baseball, the NBA, NFL, they all have some things that make people scratch their heads. I mean, the NFL with concussions and long-term health effects to their employees, these football players who then years later may or may not get health coverage after, exploiting their bodies, to the NBA with its heavy ties with communist China, which again, for many people is something very concerning. Major League Baseball with the cheating scandals, even just recently with a team that won a World Series while possibly getting signals from trash cans and cell phones. I mean, all of these sports have really serious, concerns. If you're a person who looks at this world beyond just, hey, I'm looking out for myself, but you're thinking, I want to help this world. I want this place to be a better place. So for those of you out there who are fans of the sport of golf, and if you're thinking, you know what, I'm not going to watch it anymore. I can't support that anymore. Well, I encourage you to keep watching the sport, but shift your attention from the professionals to the amateurs. Right now there are young golfers playing in high school and colleges and amateur tournaments that would love for you to come out and cheer them and to watch them and to follow them in their careers. I would encourage you to do that if you love that sport.
Adam, James, let's keep talking. We got a few more minutes. We've covered a lot of sports. We haven't talked tennis. I don't know much about it. I don't know if you want to address it. More importantly to me is baseball. The White Sox are having a rough time. They're playing your team, the Dodgers. One of the things about baseball that I think we should call to people's attention, there's a guy named Ohtani who plays for the California Angels or Los Angeles Angels. Talk a little bit about him, because this is one heavy hitter, one great pitcher, something new and different.
Indeed. For those of you who love sports and love, or even if you don't love sports, but you love seeing human accomplishment that goes beyond what has been done, this is a gentleman who is achieving some spectacular accomplishment. He is a Japanese baseball player, originally from Japan Nationals, who coming up was regarded as just a phenom. What made him unique is that he is a tremendous hitter who hits home runs, but he's also a phenomenal pitcher. And so initially, when he was thinking of coming to Major League Baseball, the United States, and playing for, the teams like the Yankees and the White Sox and the Dodgers, he was being asked, which will you do? Will you be a hitter or will you be a pitcher? And he was like, I'm going to do both. I can do it. And there was a lot of people who questioned that. Yeah. But he is literally doing it. And for 3 straight years now, he is pitching every 4 days. He takes that baseball, gets on that mound and whips those 100-mile-an-hour pitches past you. And then every day he's stepping in the box and cracking home runs. He has done things that are unbelievable. Of course, for those of you following him, you know that he's been doing things that only Babe Ruth has done. But he's doing something that Babe Ruth didn't do, and that is in the same season. Babe was a tremendous pitcher who then evolved and changed to being a great hitter. Shohei Ohtani is doing it at the same time. He's pitching and hitting at an elite level. He probably should have won. Well, it's debatable whether he should have won the MVP last year. The other guy who won it, Judge from the Yankees, also had a
pretty heavy hitter himself.
Exactly. So you couldn't go wrong with either one.
Let me ask you as we go out, since throughout the show, at the beginning and now, we have talked about the late, great Muhammad Ali. I want to ask you to give us a little bit of thoughts, and I know you have some views on it. I just want to share, because it may never be said again, that once I got on a plane in Philadelphia, I was the first person on, except for when I went into the cabin, right in first class, there was the champion. And I was too shy to stop and talk to him. But I did say, I'm 1 day older than you, champ, which is true. I'm January 16th. He's January 17th. And he's long been a hero of mine. How about your take on Muhammad Ali?
Yes, likewise. He's one of my heroes. He is an inspiration for me. And what I'll share with everybody that you might find fascinating is the deep connection between Muhammad Ali and martial arts. In fact, I just recently submitted an article to Black Belt Magazine called Muhammad Ali, the greatest ... martial artist of all time. And the reason is because his fighting style, his physical fighting style was unique. He was a big guy, he was a heavyweight, but he bounced and danced like lightweight. His style of fighting kind of changed how heavyweights fought, and truthfully, all fighters. Sugar Ray Leonard was also deeply influenced by him. So he had a big impact on boxers, but also on martial artists. Bruce Lee was a huge fan of Muhammad Ali, and he would study Muhammad Ali's fights. He would watch the tape, and then he would emulate Muhammad Ali. In fact, my teacher, Leo Fong, was Bruce Lee's training partner and close friend. And he had told me that what Bruce liked to do, because Bruce was a southpaw with his left hand back and his front hand was his right hand, he would watch the video of Muhammad Ali's fights in a mirror. He would have it on, and then he would watch in the mirror. So what his eyes were seeing was a man in the southpaw position, bouncing around and jabbing, and then he would emulate it. But Muhammad Ali's martial arts impact went beyond just the physical. He also had a mental game. He was the first person who really did trash talking, trying to psychologically psych out your opponent. And he would do that, and sometimes he crossed the line. But he was the first person that really started doing that. He also, by the way, invented rap music. And then on top of that, what makes him, to me, the greatest martial artist of all time is because the martial arts is physical, mental, and spiritual. And so his spiritual, contribution to society was that when a great war was happening in our world that many people questioned, he stood up and said, not only do I question it, but I protest it. I refuse to participate in it. And of course, it cost him greatly. It cost him years out of his prime part of his boxing career. But he did it, and he made a huge impact on society. And that, to me, is why he's such a hero for me.
Well, he was the greatest. And Adam James, you're pretty good yourself. It's always good talking to you. You do inspire me. I got some things I want to share with you, but I'll hold till later. Okay, everybody. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in today, or whether you're listening or you're watching it. We're going to be back next week with more Live from the Heartland. I'm not sure who our guests will be yet, but I want to make one announcement that if you've got a lot of clothes in your closet here in Chicago, there's an organization called Care for Real at 5339 Sheridan, and they're collecting clothes for the asylum seekers who are living all around town now. Okay, that's enough. Everybody, do good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do. Thank you, Katie Hogan. Thank you, Tom Clark. Thank you, Lynn Orman. Thank you, Hal James. Thank you, Adam James, our very first guest from Genesis at the Crossroads, Wendy Sternberg. Thanks a lot, everybody.
And thank you, Michael.
Right on to. Okay. Bye-bye.